This is Between Hooksets. I'm Chasen Walter from In Through the Outdoors with my partner in slime, Kurt Underhill from the fishing crew.
You know, I moved out of the way for that one, and you almost hit yourself in the face.
Yeah, I know. I felt it. I grazed my whiskers there a little bit, and it's like, ooh, careful. All right, so I got to get something off my chest here because, okay, what part of this did only 13 people get? You know, like I got a couple thumbs up. People just went past it, and I'm like, okay, seriously, hello, your anus. I'm like, what the hell? Nobody got that.
I didn't get that.
Look, see, look, he shared this thing about 6 planets. Who cares? And nobody took the time to look at your anus.
Nope.
You know?
Nope.
I did not
catch that until just now. So, but
that,
while you got that up before we hop him on, let's talk about September. Yes, September 26th is rules meeting 27-28. Stockman's Livestock Fall Brawl, Lake Oahe, 1 tank of gas, up to 3 guys on a team, but you're only fishing 2 guys' stuff. Their limit, 4 rods, all that kind of stuff. And then free steak dinner, $5,000 added from First National Bank. I mean, if you big bucks,
yeah.
Yep. Free shirts from Stockman's Motorsports.
Yep. Yeah, I can always use a free shirt.
So, yeah, make sure you get signed up for that. Go to thefishingcrew.com to get signed up for that. I usually get that a lot later in, and I saw that thing, and I went, let's get it right away. So,
but I got you.
Tonight,
we
got Justin Sieverding.
Oh, we sure do. Let's bring this thing up here. Well, Sieverding, how the heck you doing?
I am doing just fine. I've got my earbuds working, so really ahead of the curve here.
Well, I want to know, do your eyes still work? I mean, did you?
This is no joke. Like, that popped up on my screen when you're doing the intro, and I was like, this freaking spam. Like, I'm trying to do a podcast here, and I got this spam coming up, so I'm trying to get it off my screen. It's you. I was like, how am I going to, like, talk to these guys when there's a picture of a butthole there?
I want to know what you're looking at if that's your spam that pops up.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering, too. I was like, who's been using this computer?
Oh, look at that, Austin Bassmaster Howard. How you doing, Austin?
But so Dinger, longtime buddy, known you for a lot of years. We've had some amazing road trips together.
Oh yeah.
We've had our fishing partner roommates make donuts and not give us any. We've got all kinds. We got all kinds.
Also found out that person you don't lip off to.
And his roommates were his parents.
Yeah.
But long time in the fishing tournaments, and before you kind of started, before you really dove into tournaments, you were in the hunting world, in the decoy designing world, and then you started making, I guess the first ones were Dakota lures.
Yep.
Crankbaits, and I remember going out and testing balsa carved crankbaits with you on Lake Oahe, just trying to make sure the action works. Now you have WalleyeX.
Yeah, so WalleyeX came about in 2021, I think, is when Todd. So it's Todd Emro, Greg Strelo, and myself. And Greg's a fellow National Walleye Tour pro. Todd got into it. He was a professional muskie guy and decided he wanted to start doing some co-angling on the NWT. And just by chance, Greg and Todd got paired one day and became fast friends, and then I got thrown into the mix after that. But to go back to, that's how WalleyeX started. But to go back to Dakota Lure Company in those days, I think that was all the way back to college time, and we used to hand carve out of balsa wood, make our own bills and stuff like that, and prove everything out, and then get aluminum molds made of those carvings, and then try to prove it out into production molds, where then we had to weight it and stuff like that. Where with WalleyeX now, Dakota Lure Company was purchased by Phantom Lures, and then Phantom Lures did whatever it did during COVID. Probably shouldn't say a lot about that, but it is what it is. But WalleyeX now, we do everything, you know, as far as all of our design engineering work and everything like that goes, we do that all in CAD. So when we go into our CAD software, everything's plus or minus a thousandth of a millimeter now. It's not like the days where, you know, we get sandpaper out and start working on a bulk of carving and like trying to manipulate and make things square the universe that way. Like now, you know, our tolerances are so tight that when, you know, well, obviously when we do the design, we 3D print now. Like we didn't have access to that. So
Right.
Yeah. I went to lunch and was like, hey man, this is something I'm working on, you know, and we 3D print. So we prove everything out as far as the action and everything goes to incredibly tight tolerances before we ever go to cutting an aluminum mold for it. And that really cuts down on our learning curve, because sometimes there are changes from when you back in the day had balsa wood and you started using ABS plastic, or now when we start using some of the HDPE 3D printing resins to ABS plastic, and the weighting and density transfer, the mass stuff like that. But now we can print with such accuracy and so close in density that it's probably greater than 95% of what we wanted out of our 3D printed model is what we get in the actual production mold. And it makes it super simple because it's a matter of grams then of putting a BB in a certain place to either slow down or speed up the action out of that bait. So, you know, it's pretty amazing to see full circle. Like Kurt, you take back, I mean, way back in the day with what we used to do to now it's so much precision involved into designing crankbaits. And that's necessary, right? Like people, when they take a bait out of the package, it needs to run straight out of the package. And, you know, our stuff, like when it gets ultrasonically welded, like we don't do any of that, you know, epoxy where we glue two halves together. It almost is perfect as soon as it's ultrasonically welded. Obviously, all of our stuff is still tank tested, but yeah, what a huge change just that I've seen in my small part in designing crankbaits over the last, you know, 15, 20 years. It's come a long way, and I can tell you it's only getting more and more crazy with some of the precision that we can 3D print to. Like the 3D printer that we use and we have access to, it can print like micron level. Like it can literally print fingerprints.
Really? So
Wow.
do you actually fish with the 3D prototypes then, or do you just do you literally can?
We do. So we fish with them. They're kind of an ivory color when they come out. So like Mike Zell has painted some of our 3D printed models, and we'll take them out and fish with them. Like I'll tell you, we're working on another casting bait. That's kind of a jerk bait that's designed specifically for forward facing sonar, you know, working out the dynamics, the curvature, stuff like that to reflect that sonar beam back. But I have two of them, and they're both just plain Jane ivory colored resin that they're 3D printed out of, and took them out to Lake Erie here last week for the NWT. And I had some guys in the boat, and I was like, I want to, you know, see the action. I have an idea in my brain what it looks like. Put the trolling motor down. There's so many walleyes. It's like, of course, there's walleyes 10 feet away. Cast, it's going down. I rip it up one time. Here comes a walleye, just crushes it, get it to the boat, net it, and it cracked the crankbait. So I had two of them, and I was like, well, I don't dare put the other one in there. But that kind of proves that we're on the right track as far as action goes. But, you know, now that I'm home, I mean, I can print a half dozen of them, and we can take and start testing them out away from fish. You know, believe it or not, like we don't want to catch a fish, and that's where we do a lot of, you know, we have GoPros on poles that we can basically put in our track system alongside the boat, and then we control, you know, if it's a build crankbait, we put markings, straight lines, X's and dots on the bait, so we can tell like what kind of yaw and roll that we're getting out of the bait, you know, if the tail's moving, if we're getting good head action. And then with some of our glide bait styles, like our kamikaze or this bait that's going to be called the Warhammer, you know, we put the same kind of markings, but then we have this case that goes around the GoPro and a weight, and we just drop it to the bottom, and the GoPro suspends off the bottom, and then you basically just sit there and jig that bait aimlessly around and hope that from time to time the camera is capturing what's going on. And, if you jig for 5 minutes, it's like I probably have at least 30, 40 seconds of good video of being able to watch this bait move around. And then we can come in and we can just break it down frame by frame, because we want that roll, especially with glide baits. Like, what makes a jigging wrap so effective? Number one, it darts really well. But two, when it hits its apex before it starts to dart down, that bait will roll. And oftentimes a jigging wrap will show its back and then its belly, or it shows its belly and then its back. So it's that differentiation of, having a dark back or a light belly that really gets a fish's attention. And then we all know walleyes are like cats, right? Like, they're just designed to chase. And, they see that catches their attention. Now it's darting away quickly. That fish, just that natural instinct to chase takes over. And a lot of times with the reactionary strike bait like that, what I think goes through a fish's mind is, it's eat right now, or maybe don't eat later. And that's what makes those style of baits, so effective. And obviously we know that recipe of, or at least we think we know that recipe of what makes a bait, effective in that sense. And that's what we're trying to duplicate. But yeah, with 3D printing and being able to CAD it out, we can take and discuss like what we want to do, sit down and CAD the bait out, and then have 3D printed samples in a matter of days. And then we can take and just begin iteration after iteration, fine tuning actions that we want, sink rates, even to the point where how much time do we want it to spend floating before it actually starts darting back down, so that fish has plenty of time to, make eye contact, key in on it, target it, and chase.
Do you need a roommate?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm like, seriously, I want to live at your house.
Hey, that's fine. If you're clean, my wife will probably kick me out and take you in, because me and the dog, we're just messy. So
I can be relatively clean. I mean, I sit down and pee. I mean, you try to get the kids to realize.
I'll get the application over to you.
No, see, okay, there you go. So I had 3 boys at my place up at South Whitlock, and I said, all right, you other 2, did Cade tell you sit down and pee? And they're like, we're not women. I said, here's the deal. You end up in your house later in life, and if you stand up and pee every time, you're going to be cleaning your toilet a ton. If you sit down and pee, it's going to stay clean. So here's the deal.
I still argue. I'll stand up and pee.
Yes,
I like to think I'm a pretty good marksman myself, but
yeah, but you're still spatting.
But also, well, sometimes it's tough to shoot a snub-nosed pistol.
See, that's what you're standing in the grass. You're over peeing by the tree. You look, you go, whoa! I spattered all over my shoes. Whatever. So I'm super clean.
But. Back to the baits. I think, when you had Dakota lures, it was just crankbaits. I mean, you had a couple different sizes, and I mean, a lot of that were you limited because you're carving out a balsa, and now you have the 3D printed, so you have more time, so you're not sitting there sanding and.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many more things that you can do with CAD, especially. I mean, I don't know how far we need to get into the weeds behind, like the engineering design or the physics of something moving through water. But, we can, in CAD, you can take something that's so important in lure design is centroid, and that's the 3-dimensional center of gravity of the bait itself. And when you're carving, you don't think about that, right? Like you're trying to make a shape. Well, now I can go in and I can say, well, I want to know where centroid is on this thing. And a computer will tell me in 1/10 of a second, right? And we can design around that, where we can say, like, we want the bait to move around this point, whether that's tail kick in this direction or we want the head to wobble like this. And that really makes things a lot better, that we can design baits with a more aggressive action, with less action. And it opens this up to, back then, to your point, Kurt, we had a very limited offering to the shapes, because, it's basically me just carving balsa wood, and we'd send it over and just hope things work. Well, now we can have a crazy idea. Like, we know the basic shapes that catch fish, right? You need that bream shape. You want a shad style bait. You want a smelt looking bait. Banana baits are huge. That, like, you think of a reef runner, like that's big. And there's a couple of different body styles in that shad category that you can go to. So we can have the idea of, like, kind of what do we want this bait to look like? So we draw out that rough shape, and then we can start building the features into it. Where do we want rattle chambers at? Where do we want to put the mast so that we get that rotational aspect around that center of gravity? Even the pull point down on the bill of the bait, how far forward it is. Like if it's really far back, like we'll just say where the nose meets the bill. If it's towards the back and the bill is really far forward to that pull point, you're going to get more action out of that bill because you're allowing it to move more water before you get to that line tie, which is kind of the pivot point, right? Where if you move that forward, then you're pushing forward that pivot point, so that affects the action. So just those little minute things that when we were carving we couldn't really affect because it's just kind of, this is what we're doing. Well, we can say, well, let's design one of these baits with the pull point way in the back of the bill. Let's do one at the front of the bill. It takes me 5 minutes in CAD to do. We send it to a 3D printer, and then we can sit down and, like I said, we'll put a GoPro 5 feet down in the water. We start at half a mile an hour just to kind of start to see how the action is going. And I think that every single one of the baits we have, even the little number 4 Predator, I think the slowest bait we have is that, and that will pull at like 7.5 miles an hour and stay down in the water. And obviously you're never going to troll that fast, but it's just, that's the type of accuracy we're looking for in our baits. So when someone purchases from us and they take it out of the package and they put it on their line, they have the confidence that, I don't have to be tuning this every 10 minutes and it's going to run straight. And that was something, back in the day, Dakota Lure Company, as it transitioned after the purchase into Phantom Lures, something that we, maybe weren't the best at, just because of the fact that we didn't have access to that kind of accuracy through CAD.
Yeah. And that's huge. Like people, this transition a little bit, people kind of always say that forward facing sonar is wrecking bait company sales. What is your response to that?
So I don't disagree with that. One thing you have to keep in mind is, no matter where forward-facing sonar goes, people are still going to troll crankbaits. It's reasonably easy to do. It's incredibly effective, right? Forward-facing sonar, I would say, more so has ruined tournament fishing than fishing in general. And if you say, well, it's really hurting lure sales, and you're hearing that from someone from a lure company, that's a company that doesn't have the foresight to think, what now? We know we're gonna sell build baits. We know that, but like that's gonna happen. But what can we design now that takes advantage of forward-facing sonar? Because what is the number one thing people want with forward-facing sonar? And that's the ability to see that bait.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's so many things like putting cross hatching on the back of the bait, the radiuses involved with the back of the bait. Sonar is an acronym, right? It stands for sound navigation and ranging. So what your transducer is doing, regardless if it's forward-facing sonar or just a skimmer transducer in the back of the boat, is it's sending out a sound signal, right? And so that sound signal is hitting something and it's bouncing back. So how do you deliver as much of that energy back to the transducer as possible with a bait to make it as visible as possible? So, you get some guys, if they're casting 80 feet with a 1/4 ounce jig, that's just a small little speck on the screen, right? Well, you can put different curves and shapes into that same jig head where it has a concave surface, and that, sonar hits it and just reflects a little bit of it back. You might amplify its signature on your sonar screen by an exponential amount. It might be 5 times brighter than it originally was. So you get a guy that's lights out good at casting a jig and crawler like Tom Wynn. That guy at 100 feet out, he probably doesn't cast that far, but if it's a long ways out, he knows that little speck falling, that is his bait, and he knows exactly what to look for. Well, if a guy doesn't get to spend a ton of time on the water, he maybe isn't going to pick up that is actually his bait at that range. So, as a tackle company, that's where we come in. Like, what can we do to make a bait really shine? So if it's obvious, it looks like Halley's Comet falling to the fish, it's like, oh, there's my bait. And it makes the game easier. And, forward-facing sonar, just on that note, that isn't something that's a cure-all, for fishing. Like, people are like, oh, it's ruining it's ruining fishing. Oh my gosh, it's destroying fisheries. Come sit in my boat sometime and watch me struggle through chasing an 8-pound walleye around. And I know that I can. Oh, this is why I always say I only need 5 of them. Only 5. That's all I need. Well, if you spend an hour and a half chasing one fish around and then he doesn't bite, you know what? I now have not very much time to catch 5 fish still. So you still have to get the fish to bite, which comes down to, technique, stealthiness if you're in super clear water. And everybody knows Tom Wynn's secrets. Like he is delivered in Tom Wynn University. Like, this is what I'm doing. Like, here is actual video of what I'm doing. You put 25 average fishermen out on a body of water and say, you're going to fish against Tom Wynn. I bet Tom is going to win 85% of the time, because there is so much more to it than how simple it looks like it is. And regardless to that, if you're out fun fishing, if forward-facing sonar allows you to catch your fish, say 50% quicker, and I can have 4 walleyes, and instead of me taking 3 hours to catch my 4 walleyes, it now takes me an hour and a half. My limit was still 4. I'm still taking the same amount of fish out of the system. So how does it really affect the fishery? So this is a cliff that I will drive off of every day in this argument of forward-facing sonar. So I don't need to get down in those weeds at all. So but I can shut off about it.
It's a legitimate cliff. We went out last night. We had 3 overs in an hour and 15 minutes, and we spent 2 hours chasing fish. And I'm not kidding you. They were coming after. They were following me from 45 feet down all the way up to 25 feet. And no, it didn't matter what I did, and boom, they're gone. And then they would come back, right? And so last night my thought was, all right, it's more than this. I don't know, the bigger the fish, maybe it needs to be slower, because I think this hammering thing is all for small, young fish, right? And I tried different cadences. I went from a jig and wrap to a blade bait to a jig and crawler, and it couldn't get it done. And Josh had a jig and wrap on, and he had a jig and a crawler. And when they just didn't want to bite, they didn't want to bite, but they sure followed it. But here again, 0 in 2 hours.
Yep. So in that sense, it didn't help you, other than the fact that it is an incredible learning tool.
Yeah.
I mean, there, when you're talking about this, and I've seen this everywhere I go, we think about walleyes as being a fish that's just at a certain level, and that's just where they're always at. And what we're seeing is that these fish might come from 60 feet down and follow a bait to 10 feet under the surface. Like, they're able to do that. And cross range up and down the water column in that sense. And a lot of that has to do with, that's what bait fish do, right? So they're used to chasing in that sense. But if you get onto something like, all of a sudden, that fast hammer action that you're showing with the jig and a crawler, if all of a sudden that turns on and you get to watch that fish's attitude with forward-facing sonar, that turns you on to a technique that you can do. But, sometimes maybe they want to see that crawler, and they just want it drug away from them at 0.5 mile an hour, just a slow crank. And that's that cat deal, right? Like, they'll chase, like they're just going to come up behind it. And all of a sudden they make that decision. Am I going to eat right now, or am I just going to go back down to where I'm comfortable at? So like that 45 feet of water, that's probably, I'm not going to speak to, maybe close to a thermocline or a temperature where those fish, there's plenty of oxygen in the water and they feel comfortable with that temperature, with that strata of the water column. And are they going to come up to 20 feet below the surface where the water temp might be 10, 15 degrees warmer, where they're not comfortable? If they can come up there and get an easy meal and then return back down to that 45-degree water, they're going to do that all the time. And forward-facing sonar has done an amazing job of teaching us that, yes, the lenders, I'm going to pick on them, not really pick on them, but with in-fishermen, they have their techniques that a certain time of year you're going to find walleyes in certain places, right? And they're going to go deep this time of the year, and they're going to be in this spot or that spot. And what we're finding is that it might be 85-degree water along an edge of a weed bed, and there's walleyes there. and normal logic would tell us like that's not where they're at, but they are there. And those fish, especially if there's adjacent deeper water, they'll come up there and feed, and then they're just going to go back down to that water temperature that they're comfortable. Like I'm a huge fan, of ribeyes, love them. And if you tell me I can sit in an air-conditioned house or air-conditioned restaurant and you're going to cook for me a ribeye, but I have to go sit at a picnic table and it's 104 degrees out like it was today, and I have to eat that ribeye at that picnic table in 104 degree temperature in the blazing sun, but immediately after I'm done eating, I can just go back into my house or back into the restaurant where it's 70 degrees or 65 degrees, which is better, and relax after I get done eating. I'm going to do that every time. And these fish are no different than that. Like they're going to go to where there's an easily buffet line of food, right? And what do weeds have or shallows have that are warm water? There are minnow hatches that happen in the middle of summer. There are bug hatches. There's frogs up there, mayflies, come up to the surface to hatch. There's so many things that happen high in the water column in warm water. And what forward-facing sonar is really teaching us is that those fish are up there. They are there to feed, and it allows us to target them easier. And that's where a lot of people, I guess, have a problem with it, is because of the learning we are doing in that sense. And we're not necessarily fishing a school of fish. We're targeting an individual fish, like we're sniping that fish. And that's where people really have a problem with it. But I think if they truly understood how forward-facing sonar works, that it's not a cure-all that allows you to catch absolutely every fish you see, they would have a much different opinion of it.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt about it. It's truly amazing. And really what I learned over the last couple of times we've been out is suspended fish are much more aggressive. And, you've got fish in 20, 25 feet of water when you're fishing in 45 feet of water. And those fish they're darn interested in what's going on, and getting them to really hook up is a whole lot easier. And it blows my mind how easy it is and how tough it is. Because frankly, fishing with forward-facing sonar is damn hard, right? Sure, it's a video game. You can drop your line down. You can watch that thing down there. You can jig all day long. It's just like a dad and a kid going out with a camera ice fishing and sitting on perch for 8 hours. You're watching it, you see it, it's really cool, but damn, it's tough, right?
And it can be, yeah, to your point, the most frustrating thing ever if the fish aren't actually biting. It's neat to watch them interact with your bait, 100%. Yeah. But when that bait comes back to the boat and there's not a gravel lizard attached to it, very frustrating.
Yeah. So with that, we had talked about this with Jim Randash last week. We were talking about in the boat, going back to the baits and stuff, in your opinion, why or what do you think it is that, like, when the jigging wraps first started hitting the open water, it was like lights out, right? And now it's a lot harder to catch them on a jigging wrap. Is that because the fish is learning that bait, or what's your...
I honestly think that, I mean, I can't speak to the intelligence of a fish. Like this is just my theory behind this. But I love duck and goose hunting, and if you start early in the season, so let's relate that to this, because I think a lot of it is along the same lines. You get early in the season, especially Canada geese, like they'll fall for anything, right? You get late in the season, they get shy to blinds. If Billy has his head out of the blind and, his big pearly whites are out, like they don't like that, eyeballs, the glare off of decoys, all of these different things that are going on. I think that fish are getting conditioned in the same way. Maybe they don't necessarily know what is going on, but if, say, there's a school of them, and I'm just going to call out a name that I saw just come up there, but, you're jig wrapping and all of a sudden Johnny the walleye takes and grabs a hold of that bait, and he's not in the school anymore. Fish, I think, put out a pheromone, like if they're distressed like that, right? And it's like I saw Johnny go up and grab this. Hey, Johnny Candle, by the way, go up and grab this jigging wrap, and now he's not around anymore, and he put out this kind of scent that's funky and maybe like a little bit dangerous. And so the next time I see that bait, or see something similar, maybe I'm not going to take as much interest into it. And I honestly think that's where we're at with a lot of these fish. They see so many different baits, especially that glide bait market, that they're becoming conditioned. I don't know that they necessarily understand it. They have the capability to understand, but I think they get conditioned to know that if they see this, maybe there's something a little wonky. Now, the beauty is that sometimes when these fish are just on and they're feeding aggressively, I don't think it matters. I think you could take a 2-ounce lead weight and put a treble hook on it and start jigging it around there, and they're just going to come up and eat it. But I do think that when the fish are in a neutral or negative mood and we're just ripping those baits around them all the time, I think they do get conditioned to that. And that's where this exploration that companies have going on, where they're developing out new baits for forward-facing sonar and new actions, a new sound chamber, stuff like that. I think that's what people really need to focus in on is trying new things instead of the old, what we consider the old guard of baits that, they work still fantastically well. But if you can get something with a little bit different action, a little bit different profile, that bait will probably perform in tough conditions more than a bait it sees absolutely every day. Because I mean, think on Lake Oahe, the typical walleye on, outside of like Cow Creek in a day, how many jigging reps the average walleye sitting there sees in a day, right? Whereas if you show up with ABC brand and it's something new, they're like, I haven't seen that anymore. Maybe I'll go take a bite out of that. And then, Bob the walleye now isn't coming back.
That's what happened to me last night. I went to Dakota Mart and I bought this off brand. They're $5.49. 4-inch jigging wrap, and they're shaped differently. And I dropped that thing down and I fiddled around and bam, I had a walleye like that. And then after a little while, the bite got tougher and I went to the blade bait, and it didn't matter what we used. It just didn't matter. They were off. But I think when you talk about conditioning, don't you think that their lateral line conditions as well? So, because that lateral line gives them, that's how they sense, right? They feel things. So you gotta think that walleye feels that glide bait and goes, oh, that's a familiar, I bit on one of those and luckily I came off, and after a while they just got to go, you know what? This just doesn't feel good, right?
I 100% agree with that. And something that, like, I'm going to speak to WalleyeX on this is one thing that we really try to focus in on is water displacement. And, the way that the bait moves through the water and it disrupts, creates the little micro vortices and stuff in the water, because the lateral line is such an important part of how fish hunt. Especially if you think about a walleye is a river fish, same as like a sauger. So, they're able to feed in like really murky conditions if need be, being in a river. So their senses are beyond anything that I think we can comprehend. But I think you're right on point with, if you see this little tiny thing darting around and it's really not displacing water that, maybe a bait fish would or something like that, I'm conditioned to think, or maybe not conditioned to think, but conditioned to have a feeling for that something's not right. And I'm not quite in the mood to chase that around because maybe I had one of those hooks in my mouth. I've seen studies, because I get way in the weeds on researching things. That's just in my nature. But I've seen where goldfish have incredible memories, and they can actually train goldfish to move through mazes. And I'd have to imagine a walleye is much the same thing. But I don't have any facts because I have never had a pet walleye that I tried to bait into moving through a maze. But I mean, like I said, I have no idea. But that's where I think that the development of new baits, like you see these companies are always innovating, always coming out with new things. That is such, it's not a lot of people are like, well, that's a gimmick. And maybe to a certain degree it is. But I also think that for fishermen, if you're not right on the edge of using new things and seeing if they work, then you're way behind. Because like I'm just gonna, I pick out a bait that just came to market not too long ago, any one of them. I'm not saying like a specific company, but all of a sudden it's like 3 months in, holy cow, this bait is just crushing it. It's catching everything. Well, if you had started using it 3 months previous, then you're already in on the golden years of using that bait. Well, after 2 years, that bait maybe has, used its turn in the scheme of bait development, and fish are becoming less responsive to it. And so that's where, some of these companies come out with things like, I'm an owner of WalleyeX. Do I only purchase WalleyeX baits? Absolutely not. Like, I courtesy my tackle collection, like I could set up a Bass Pro Shops right in my garage and put Johnny Morris to shame on my collection versus the selection in some of his stores. But that's just in our nature. Like, we have to be trying all of these new things, and I have kind of a crazy brain to start with it in that respect anyway. And like, I have been really going to town and looking into new tactics, new techniques, new bait styles, fall rates, fluttering action, stuff like that, because that's what we need, one as a company and me as a tournament angler. If you look at my tournament fishes this year, you would swear I just got into this. Like, it's pretty pathetic. And the beauty of tournament fishing, I can't say, well, I'm not fishing well because of Kurt Underhill. It doesn't work that way. It's because Justin Sieverding sucks. So, I'm going to have a long off season to think about, like, why is it that I don't remember what I used to be pretty good at? And that's fine. But I'm also, if I go out pre-fishing, I want to be trying new things. And maybe I'll strike out 9 times out of 10. But if I can find that one thing, then I might be onto something for a while, and you get on that hot streak. So, like I said, yes, the lateral line, super important. Do I think that they get conditioned to feel certain things? Absolutely. I have no proof to that. But I 100% agree with you that they might see a certain bait, and not even see a certain bait, sense a certain bait and say, I had a bad encounter with that, or Johnny the fish had a bad encounter with it, and I'm just going to stay away from it unless I'm really fired up and feeding. And then, like I said, it doesn't matter what you pull.
Yeah.
Or if it's a walleye on Lake Erie, like, I can tell you, like, you just go out there and whatever, throw a hot dog on a frickin' hook and catch away. It's
like they're hungry all the time. So how about let's talk about the finisher. Are you guys are you, because it's I want to say it's a one of a kind, but I truly believe Mustad actually has that vertical hard bait that is much like a finisher, and I wonder if that's where Berkley didn't kind of get the idea. I've seen it before. You won't ever find it on a shelf anywhere, but that finisher. Are you guys thinking about a vertical hard bait like that?
So when I was talking earlier about that bait, I cast it out and I broke it. It is a bait along those lines, but we're kind of coming into it in a little bit different way than a finisher, and it's something we've been working on for a while. We're trying to get the roll right so it doesn't tangle, because if you look at some of the classic baits that just flat out put fish in the boat everywhere you go, like, let's pick on a Rapala original floater, and you watch that bait move through the water, it shows the back of the bait and then belly roll, right? Like, it's this wide movement through the water like that. And in my opinion, that is something that is so important, because that's contrast. And they say, well, fish don't see like us. They see in the ultraviolet. Well, they see colors. They just interpret them differently than us. And I think that contrast is what really catches fish. So a lot of the things that we do in that sense, we work on that contrast. And when you start talking about a bait that you want to hop vertically through the water column, when it falls and you still want it to roll, there's a lot of opportunity, especially if you have 2 treble hooks that are on split rings there, for that bait to tangle into the line itself. And that obviously is a bad thing. And so we've been spending a lot of time, and I'm talking like a couple years into working on this bait of getting that right. And we're getting so close on that. So there's still some different iterations that we'll be working on. And I would love to already have it to market, but we're not going to bring it to market until it's where we want it. But yes, to answer your question, yes, we are.
Yeah. Okay. So we got a big long comment here from Johnny, kind of what you were saying. So if you could, you're on your computer, so you can read that. But kind of like you said, the original Shad Rap.
Yeah, and that's where, I mean, Johnny Candle. I've known Johnny for a long time. Johnny's a legend of the sport. He's been there, done that. He has the T-shirt, right? Like, he's knowledgeable. on most everything that he does in fishing. And he's just a true professional of fishing too. Like he has done so much to grow not just walleye fishing, but professional walleye fishing. So I'll stop sucking up to Johnny now. But he's so right that water displacement as a bait moves through the water, and we're to that contrast point, but leaving that vapor trail in the water. If you look at a WalleyeX bait, and you think a guy that is a part owner in that company would have one sitting here that he could show, but he doesn't. But like at the front of our baits, our build baits, we have these paddles up at the front of the bait, these two nodules. Like our bills have this radius at the front, and it sits in two different planes, and then it has these two nodules at the front. And what those two nodules at the front do is they provide what in aeronautics. So keep in mind that air and water are both fluids. Water generally is about 800 times more dense. Fresh water is about 800 times more dense than the air that we're breathing right now. But they operate from a physics perspective in a very similar way. Well, everybody that's ever flown on an airplane, if you look out the window and you look at the wing, you'll see those vertical protrusions that come off the tip of the wing. You might have one that comes vertical, one that comes down. You might have a set that goes up there. Those are called winglets. And what they do is they provide something called interference drag on the wing. So as that wing moves through the air, you get these little microvortices of air that happen around the wing, and that's drag, and that's bad. Like that's inefficient for that wing to go through, and it increases your fuel consumption. And obviously airlines are looking to do things as cheap as possible. So you put these winglets on the wings, and what that does is it helps to smooth out areas of air that are moving at different velocities. So these nodules on our baits at the front, they are punching these micro vortices out away from the bait so that the bait itself has clean water to move through. And that's why you can take a little 2-inch bait and run it 7.5 miles an hour without much issue with our little number 4 predator, even though you're never going to troll that fast with it. But because it has all of this clean water to move through, and people see that curved bill and they're like, oh, that bait's out crazy moving around. No, that's just a perfectly straight line. But to get to Johnny's point, since we move these little micro vortices up and over the back of the bait, when that bait moves through the water, you're leaving those little vortices in the water. So you're leaving a disruption behind the bait, much like a bait fish moving through. Because when his tail is wagging and his pectoral fins, his dorsal fins, anal fin, all these things are working in unison for that bait to move through the water, he's creating all of these little micro vortices in the water itself. And you don't think about it, and that's really like where I get into the weeds real bad on this and can talk about it for hours. Kurt knows this, and well, I guess Brian, you know this too, but that's what we're trying to mimic out with that is, do those nodules at the front provide a beneficial aspect to that bait moving through water? 100% it does, because it allows our baits to operate. We can impart motions and actions into the bait that really are impossible, because our baits, if they start to step out of line and they start to encounter this water that is, at a different velocity than it's moving, it naturally just wants to settle right back into that pocket of clean water. So that's what provides the stability. So those nodules are great for that. But more importantly, they provide kind of a tracking area for these fish to target and say, wow, this thing's moving through the water. I can really key in on it and follow, chase, and hopefully strike that bait. So, Johnny, 100% right. Like that is so important, that you want that disturbance of water, because it's so natural for a bait fish to produce that. And that is how we at WalleyeX are trying to mimic that as best we can without actually having fins on our baits that, waggle through the water.
So don't bother sending me the application. I'm going to just stop at the store and pick it up. Okay. I mean, would that work for you?
So we have
that's fine.
We have a question. How do you go about designing your lure?
So a lot of it comes down to, if a person were more organized, I could show you a lot of this, but a lot of it still comes down to quite simply, we'll take in, like Greg and Todd and I, we'll sit down and just talk about, shape of a bait we want to do. Do we want that bream style bait? Do we want a shad style, a smelt style, more of a stick bait? And we'll kind of work through the dynamics of what the side profile of that bait looks like. And that's just hand drawn. It's like, yep, that's what we want. And I'll usually just draw that on a piece of computer paper, like printer paper, and just draw that by hand, and I'll get a rough shape of what I want. I can scan that in, and then I can go into my Rhino CAD software, and I can just trace out that shape. And from there, I can start building a 3-dimensional product based off of that side profile. And, we talk about, the thickness of the plastic, like the sidewalls of the bait, where the weight chambers are, the design of the bill, stuff like that. That's peripheral. That comes after what that bait we want it to look like. Even the thickness, how wide does that bait look? And so it's a little bit like working with clay, but in reverse. Like we start with something that is flat, and then from there we expand it out into being something that looks like a bait and is neat. We put the scaling and all that stuff on. So it's a pretty neat process, but it does still start, at least for me anyway, quite simplistically, where I'll literally take a pencil and just sketch out a rough design of what it is we want. Greg and Todd and I will say, yeah, it looks about like something we want. And then from there, we sit down and just knock out 3-dimensionally what this bait is going to look like. And then, once you have that actual 3-dimensional bait finished, where it's like, yep, this is the body we like. It looks good. The eye looks good. The gill plates look good. All the things that really are there for humans to look at. Then it comes down to the brass tacks of how we're going to mount the bill on there, where the weight chambers are going to be. The weight chambers, we call them rattle chambers, same thing, because if you put a bunch of weight forward, that slows the head down, so you're going to get more tail kick. You can move it to the back, all these little dynamics. Then it comes down to, we have a discussion, what are we looking for in action of this bait? Is this bait going to have a ton of action, where it just moves through the water and it's just growing crazy? Does it have a lot of side-to-side roll? Does it have a slow kick to the tail? All of that stuff. But it's all things that we can that we can exact into these baits pretty easily. Like we're pretty imaginative in getting things pretty close to what we want the first time. But since we have access to incredible 3D printers, we can just print them out, glue them together, take them down. I go to Lake Oahe all the time, just put the boat in the water, put the GoPro down, and people are like, what is he doing out in 200 feet of water, just driving around in a circle? It's like, that's probably what I'm doing. So,
so happening and being late to come to a weigh-in. That's happened.
So that has happened. And I do kind of have a reputation like Hunter at the NWT. Like I generally, if whatever flight I'm in, I'm usually the last boat there. So
yeah, well, okay, so I can just sleep on a cot, and I'll bring my sleeping bag and a pillow, and I can sleep in the garage. I'll be fine.
He's like already started drawing on our table.
Oh yeah, I've got six or seven at home. When I go back up to Whitlock, I'll bring them home.
You're gonna have new baits in the Chasen Walter series.
Hey, I'm 100% all in on it. And like we have, I think, yeah, we call it the. Sorry, I had to double check with that, but we call the bills we have right now the Saber Web. And we're actually working, because like I said, trolling of crankbaits, that is not going to go anywhere. Like people are always going to troll crankbaits. Yeah. So we're actually working on a shad bait and a stick bait, and it's going to feature a brand new bill called the Daedalus bill, which is like the bill we have now, but in reverse. And it's going to have some actions that are just like, I'm excited about it. Like I get pretty wound up about everything that we have, but this stuff, I'm going to get really excited because it imparts motion into the bait in a way that our current bills don't. It still makes those little micro vortices in the water. It's still super stable in the water, where you'll be able to pass these baits along at speeds that are much higher than what you're actually going to fish them through. But it like I said, it's going to be actions that fish have never seen before. And in my mind, that's going to make them effective. So
are you talking credge kind of bill?
So it's away
the secret.
So instead of these nodules being at the head of the bill, they're actually towards the back. They're almost like flared out gills, and so the bait bites harder, and you get this this head kick out of the bait that it's wild. That's only way I can describe it. Todd and I, one day we were talking about this. He's he's a big Lake Superior salmon fisherman. And we were talking about he loves running stick baits. And I was like, man, we should make a stick bait. I like stick bait fishing. And so we just kind of started going through like what's something we can do, like that Rapala side to side wobble, like that's just classic balsa wood. And we can design that into the bait, but it's what if we have that classic side to side roll that's like this, but if you looked at the bait vertically, you also had this turn. So you would call it like a sinusoidal motion where you have this like wave of the bait moving through. And it's just, I don't know, it's a really, really neat action. So we can put these sound chamber, the weighting, the rattle chambers, instead of being in the belly of the bait, on these baits, they'll actually be up at the back.
Oh, wow.
And it just imparts a really cool action. So that's something that, we're not a big company. So we're, trying to dump what resources we have available into creating these molds, but it's really a process. Obviously it's an expensive process and we want to have all of these things, but with the craze of forward facing sonar, some of these things have kind of taken a little bit of a backseat because like I said, we have a couple of baits that we're working on that are right towards that forward facing sonar craze that we feel probably should come to market before some of these other trolling baits. But I'd say by like 2027, we'll have these new baits with this dataless bill installed. And not to take anything away from our saber lip, it's a killer. It will be for a long, long time. But I am really excited about these other build baits that we have coming.
So there must be a story behind this question.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you this because I see that pop up from my little buddy Drew. This was a couple years ago. I was going to go up on Oahe and take some video and I asked Drew, I said, Drew's like, what are you doing? I was like, hey, I'm going to go up on Oahe and test some lures. Oh, okay. So he's like, hey, I'll go with you. I was like, hey, that's awesome. That's fantastic. It makes it easier for me. Well, I tried to type in my text message that I was going to get the stuff ready so I could take some good underwater video. And it auto-corrected to good underwear videos. And Drew texts me back, actually, I'm not going to go.
Well,
and then I told him, I was like, no, that's not right. He's like, I don't believe you, dude. But anyway, that's kind of an inside joke with him. But thank you, autocorrect.
If anybody wanted to be an underwear model, it'll be Drew doing his 2-a-day workouts for 8 minutes at a time.
Yeah, out there drinking his Celsius energy drink.
Yeah.
But is it Celsius energy drink?
So let's get in.
So maybe, I hope so.
We could go for hours on baits.
I'm just hoping we can fill an hour here. Are we going to be able to do that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, this is the problem. Kurt knows this. If you're going to have me, we'll just spend 10 hours talking about whatever.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Do you want to talk about the tournament thing?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about you fish. You started. What was your first tournament you fished on a national level? Was it
that FLW?
It was at FLW.
Yeah. So the PWT was a little ahead of my time, but the FLW, I got in on a few of those. Obviously, just being young and all that stuff. That I was limited. I had to really pick and choose which ones I fished, and then took obviously would fish some local tournaments and stuff like that. But then as the FLW went out, then the NWT took over, and then obviously that's been the stalwarts for what, like 12 years now. I haven't been in there for 12 years, but for quite a while, and it's pretty interesting because when I got in there is kind of the heyday years of the NWT, and over the last couple of years we've seen this kind of like decline in our attendance with pros, and this year was really tough as far as the regular season goes with attendance, and obviously the economy. It looks like it's doing well, but there are companies that are, pulling back pretty hard on sponsorship dollars. A lot of companies would rather pay with product than dollar bills, and that makes it tough for guys to get out and fish the full schedule. I always figure it costs between $24,000 and $27,000 out of pocket to go run a national walleye tour, do the 4 regular season events and the championship, and that's probably being a little conservative, and that's just your out-of-pocket expenses. It doesn't include the fact that in today's world we run around in $100,000+ boats. If you would have told me once upon a time that I would have a boat that costs at retail almost $150,000, I would have laughed so hard, but I have one, and it's not like oh wow, I have the nicest boat out there. I just have a middle of the run boat. Like there's so many of them. So I
remember in 2010, a guy that worked next door to me come over and he's like, I'm gonna go buy a new Ranger boat. They have them on sale for $83,000. And I'm like, you're insane. I'm like, he goes, well, all I got to do is guide 4 times a month and I can make my payment. And I said, 1, have you ever guided? No. I said, 2, you got to double that. You got to almost triple that because you don't work most of the winter. And he goes, oh, yeah, good point. And I said, and $82,000, you're nuts. We would die for an $82,000 boat.
That's called a 2019 now.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that was
it's right? Crazy. I mean, it's just wild. I keep thinking to myself that fingers crossed, prices are going to come down. Prices need to come down. Interest rates need to come down. But for the last probably almost 24 months now, interest rates have been outrageous. If you're going to buy $100,000 boat, you better have $70,000+ to put down on it. Otherwise, or be able to just afford it in general. Like I get contacted a lot by young anglers who want to be. This is going to be my PSA for the night right now. But I get contacted by a lot of young anglers who want are dedicated to becoming professionals, and that's fantastic. I would never ever deter someone from wanting to be a professional fisherman. But my biggest, and they ask, what can I do? How can I get sponsors? And to be honest with you, the best sponsor you could possibly have is yourself. Like, go, learn a trade, go get an education that allows you to take that risk if you can't get financial backing from companies to go out and do it on your own. Otherwise, it is a massive financial burden to go out and be a professional walleye fisherman. And so that's I think the biggest thing that
professional bass fishermen, right? I mean, you can say that for professional bass fishermen. $40,000 in entry fees they pay in a year. And they went to free entry fees, and the payouts dropped, so they got together and said, "No, we'll pay a little bit, but thank you for trying." But I mean, we're talking a massive scale compared to what we're looking at for people. Oh, yeah. It's not easy. It's just not easy out there, and you're 100% correct when you say, go become your own sponsor.
Yeah, I think that's the smartest way to go do it. Learn a trade. I'm not saying like you have to go to college, go get a degree, but I mean, tradesmen make unbelievable money for half the effort in spending the expense into a college degree. Obviously, college degrees are still a good thing. I'm not saying anything bad about that, but that flexibility and being able to travel you need. And there's for every one person that actually has the sponsorship dollars from companies to go out and fish a full season, there are 500 people that approach that same exact company wanting the same thing. So it's a very competitive market. And, thinking outside the box, to national brands that aren't necessarily in the fishing space and telling them that, hey, I have a 20-foot boat that is your canvas. It's a giant moving billboard. When you have people who aren't fishermen that if they see a boat wrapped driving down the road, they look at it. And when you're traveling the country, like on these tours, there is definitely value for companies to become involved in sponsoring people in that sense. But keep in mind that when you contact some of these companies, you're probably not the only one that has reached out to them. And that's where having the resume to back you up, is important. And some of these young anglers, until they get out and prove themselves, you're probably going to be doing a lot of self-funding.
Well, you got it, but you got to think outside the box. So I did 2 applications for pro staff last week, and I just decided, it's time to start.
You're approved, by the way. I saw it.
Thank you very much. But no, so I'm excited to go to the mailbox on Friday when I get to Whitlock. So I did an application for Depends. Because I mean, seriously, you know what fisherman doesn't want to just get themselves keep fishing?
Exactly.
Right? Yep. And then because of Jim Randash, Preparation H. I mean, so those two I should have locked up because nobody else in the fishing world is contacting Depends and Preparation H. But by God, they're going to be on my boat and pickup.
Yep.
You know, and all right, Brandon, to your thing, the term pro walleye fisherman, literally zero qualification aspect. I've said that for years, right? I mean, it truly is. It truly is something that they have to pay. Anybody can pay to play. And I was going to ask this question: if you look at this in fishing the years of National Walleye Trail you fished, I bet we can name about the same 5 guys that are actually making 100% of their money from fishing tournaments.
Yep, that from the fishing industry. Yeah, 100%. You know, and as
you I won't even say that you're making it because you have a business in the industry, right?
Yep.
Like,
oh yeah, especially after last year, or this season. Like, if I was counting on being able to eat because of my tournament winnings this year, boy, I would be real skinny come next year.
Good luck paying for the gas too, right? I mean, the money. Well, think about just going out by yourself for a weekend or for a night of fishing. You got to fill up the pickup, you fill up the boat, you buy the bait, and bait's not cheap anymore. What is it, like $8, $9, $10 for a dozen crawlers or minnows now? Like, what the hell happened?
Yeah. Bait. I mean, live bait has gotten outrageous. I mean, it used to be you could get a scoop of minnows for $2. It's like $6. It's just everything has gotten exorbitantly expensive from this inflation thing. But and that's the whole thing is, if you're going to go out and you're going to do this, like, you better be able to self-fund and just say that I'm going to spend this money and it's not going to affect me at home.
Yeah.
But, to Brandon's point, you can, if you have the money to swing, you can be a professional walleye fisherman. You can be a professional anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can be a professional carpenter if you pay somebody to come to your house, you can, whatever. I don't know.
So James says, which tour is the best route for advertising? I'm going to selfishly say the fishing crew, but
okay.
But I will also say this is, what level are you looking for? Are you looking for a national exposure? Are you looking for a local exposure? It all kind of depends, in my opinion, what your business is. And I know, Justin, you probably approach your sponsors the same way as I approach sponsors on my tour. If I can't sell for you, if I can't sell for you, then I'm doing no good.
Yep. Hey, here, maybe this will help. Take a peek at this National Walleye Tour 2026 schedule.
Yeah.
Right, there's basically there's 4 tournaments there, right? I mean, that's 4. So where is the best place for sponsorship dollars and exposure? Boom. You've got 3 more tournaments?
So, right. I mean, I understand that, the more tournaments, I both of those, I'm going to say, have a pretty level playing field. And that's where, I was saying that if you're going to wrap a boat and have, main stem sponsor on the side of your boat. I saw David Landsteiner. He traveled with me as a co for a season. He's a friend. He's a great guy, a great fisherman. He went outside the box and he found a sponsor, Ellingson, to sponsor his boat. I had no idea what that is. Now, just because I saw his boat and he's a buddy and I was interested, I looked at it. But I guarantee you there have been thousands of people that have seen his rig traveling down the interstate, not on the water at the tournament, driving down the interstate, at the gas station, at Bass Pro Shops, at Cabela's, at the local bait shop, at a local restaurant. That is where the advertising is most powerful. It's not when that boat is on the water. When that boat is on the water, I'm not paying attention to it. I can give a care less. But when I see a cool, like David's boat is like a sky blue color, it's a really pretty boat. Probably not how he'd want me to describe it, but it stands out, and it's something that your eye is drawn to, and it's a mobile billboard. It's no different than when you're driving down the interstate and you see a billboard along the road. Like, that's what we're doing, but we're driving at 10,000 miles all around the country. So whether it's Kurt's fishing crew events, they're going to see it like, you're going to see it more in a local way, right? Like the tournaments are up and down South Dakota. So is that an opportunity for a South Dakota based company to really get involved? Like, Cowboy Country Store steps up to the plate big, right? And it's like, okay, we have Cowboy Country Stores around here. It would make sense to have a Cowboy Country Store wrap boat in that sense, because wow, you're in those areas. So then you have these national companies that maybe aren't in the fishing industry. They just want exposure. Well, you can provide them 20 to 22 feet of the great advertising space, because that boat is going to be seen, whether it's the National Walleye Tour, the MWC, the AIM circuit, where you're just out and about driving. That's where their advertising opportunity, where it pays to pay these guys to wrap their boats in with your brand, your company, because it doesn't matter what it looks like on the water at all. It's just, what does it look like when it's driving down the road and is going to attract attention of potential customers during those times, when it's sitting, like I said, sitting at the gas station, at the bait shop, at a restaurant, just driving down the interstate, driving down a highway. Like that's the opportunity there for companies.
And I think also on that aspect, and I've said this several times, and I'll use your company as an example. If I see Berkeley on the side of a boat, I don't necessarily Google Berkeley.
Yep.
Because we know what it is. I see WalleyeX, I Google it and go, what the hell is WalleyeX, right? Every time I'm watching one or I'm driving down the road and I see one or whatever, and I pick that weird name out, or even the little logo that's on the side of the boat, and I'm like, what the heck is In Through the Outdoors? I look it up.
Right.
Because we know the Mercuries, the Rangers, the Berkeleys of the world. We know them names. We don't have to, I personally don't have to look them up.
Yep.
Now, that's not everybody, right? We're an anomaly in what we do. But I watch tournaments, and I'm like, what the heck is this? And
right.
And I Google that one. And when I'm watching the weigh-ins, I'm like, what is WalleyeX?
Yep.
And
you're 100% right. Like a buddy of mine, Austin Redding, they just started didn't just start. They're kind of blowing up. I'm going to say it, like this boat drip. It's cleaning products for your boat, and it's actually really good stuff. And I told him, hey, let's throw it on. We'll throw it at the nose of my boat. Like it's the first thing that gets to everywhere I go in my boat. And like I have gotten so many questions surrounding it, because I came from hot sauce. And I hate the smell of hot sauce. It works, but this stuff smells like I can drink it, and it works a little better. So there's so much opportunity in that sense, that it's something that people aren't familiar with, but it gives them an opportunity to see it, become exposed about it, Google search it. When I can tell you just personally, like I carry a ton of WalleyeX stickers. We do have an awesome logo. I'm not Dale that designed it. He did such a great job, but I carry just a bunch of WalleyeX stickers in my truck, because people will come up and, man, I love that logo. Here's a sticker, throw it on your truck. So it's good advertising in that sense. Obviously it's self-serving because I'm part owner in it. But, if it was just Joe Blow Public that was out running a WalleyeX boat and they're handing that out, that's fantastic. But when we're at gas stations, we get approached so often by people who want to come up and talk to us. They see the boat that's wrapped, and it's a great opportunity to talk about sponsors and different products that you're using and things like that. So these are all things, I guess, what I'm trying to get at the heart of it, that happen off the water. And that is where the value comes in for people who are thinking about sponsoring someone. Like if there's somebody on here who a tournament angler approached, and they're like, man, I don't know a lot about it. What can they do for me? I'm telling you that it's not their on the water activity. It's not a tournament finish, like that winning a tournament. That's not what is going to benefit you in sponsoring someone and wrapping their boat. It's what they do off the water. And I do realize I hate social media. I'm not good at it. I try to sometimes interact with it, but it's beyond me. But I get that is an important part in the modern world, is social media, but you cannot, discard the fact that tactile visual, just seeing it in person and interacting with it on a boat with someone with it on their jersey, that is still the most powerful advertising that exists. And you cannot replace it by screen time.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of people that ask me if I'm a pro fisherman when I'm wearing my jersey. They're like, so why are you wearing a jersey? I'm branding. Every time I go to a tournament, just about every angler there knows who I am now because I've branded, and it's the look, right? It's all about a look. I'm not bragging on anything. But yeah, you have to brand yourself.
And it's that in-person interaction, I'm just going to harken back to Johnny Candle. I can remember the first time I ever met Johnny Candle, and this was a long, long time ago. Corey Heiser and him were doing one of his walleye universities, and it was in Rapid City, South Dakota. And I was a young buck. In fact, I still have the yellow folder I got that day with all the information that Corey and him gave out that day. But that was my first interaction with Johnny, and I think that back then he had a Crestliner boat, but he had the boat, it was all wrapped and the truck wrapped and stuff like that. It was just all, but more importantly, when you went and interacted with Johnny, he's a true professional. He represents his brands and he's knowledgeable, and that is what leaves a lasting impression on Joe Blow public, and wants you to do and will lead you to do business with those brands that are on his boat, on his truck, and make you research into it. So, like I said, tournament fishing, tournament finishes have very little to do with advertising potential with an individual angler. It's how do they present themselves off the water and to the outward facing public, because that is who is going to represent you in that sponsorship position. And you're going to interact with 10,000 actual people over the course of the season, whether it's the National Walleye Tour, the AIM, the MWC, Kurt's stuff that is more South Dakota focused. But when you're traveling around, everyone's looking at it, and it's no less powerful than someone that's on the interstate driving through South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and New York, like the last National Walleye Tour when I left Fort Pierre. So there's massive opportunities there, but you got to look at the individual. How are they going to represent your brand? And do you want to get that brand out in front of a lot of people? If you do, fork up the cash, wrap a boat. It's no different than having a billboard alongside the interstate.
Except for it moves all the time. And the other thing is, like, going to Johnny Candle, you brought him up, is one thing I've always told these young kids and young guys that talk to me about getting sponsors: don't get into business with a brand you don't believe in. Yep. And, Johnny's been with some of his sponsors for his entire career, right? He believes in their product. He's not jumping brands to jump brands. He believes in that aspect, and he stays with it. And he might lose some better deals. I'm not saying guys might lose better deals that, Humminbird comes and offers more money than Lowrance to you, but you believe in your Lowrances and you don't waver,
Well, Kurt, this, like I've been a Lowrance guy forever. I always will be. Like that's the brand I use. I like Mercury Motors, those guys that are jumping brands all the time. Yep. They lose some credibility, but you see the guys that are the stalwarts of industry in the fishing world, like they have relationships and they last. And to your point, Kurt, they believe in them. And that is the most powerful sales pitch there is I've been with them forever. I believe in this product. Try it. You will like it. When the public hears that, they're going to take that more seriously than, well, you had Lowrance on your jersey last year. Now it's Garmin. Now you're thinking about going to Humminbird. That does away with credibility. And in this industry, especially with how tight things are, and to like Brandon's point, that if you can pay, you can play to be a pro, that credibility is really all a lot of people have. And it's just something you cannot sacrifice.
Well, we got a couple more comments here from Brandon. I wasn't forgetting about you. They were longer, so I wanted to give them the time they needed. I agree with the Premier thing. I agree. I think we can all agree with that. But if you I didn't really start following bass until a couple years ago. And if you deep dive into them guys, that's not peachy over there either.
No.
Their sponsor levels and their money commitments and all these things.
And we're talking the elites.
Yeah, they're talking the elites. Yeah. They had to work their way there, but they still pay $40,000. And I had a buddy say this to me one time, and it made sense. Tournament anglers bass tournament anglers, walleye tournament anglers want to look like they're professional football players, right? They think they should get paid to be there.
Yeah. When
really we're more like NASCAR drivers. If a NASCAR driver loses his team, he's done.
Yeah, right.
Right? I mean, if you know, Dale Earnhardt Jr. had Budweiser. Budweiser decides they don't want Dale Earnhardt Jr. anymore.
Mm-hmm.
What's Dale Earnhardt Jr.? You know, right. They're getting their sponsors to pay the way. It's a lot harder because we can't televise something for 2 hours and get, you know, to televise, you know, we're trying to do more than most in the walleye world right now, but you go back to head. That thing was awesome when it first came out. I mean, I was in your shop during COVID with it on the big screen. We were watching it. I lost my luster after a little bit because I'm not sitting there for 8 hours a day watching people fish.
Too long.
You know, a football game's 2 hours. A NASCAR race is 2-3 hours, right? I mean, we can't do that in the fishing world.
You know, I agree with that. And also, why are our, you know, our tournaments not? Why don't we have more tournaments? Like me, I sucked real bad this year. That's fine. That's on me. But if you could say, well, you sucked for the first 4, there's 3 more, I'd be at them, right? Like I love tournament fishing. Like I love that competition that it brings, especially when you're fishing against the group of anglers that are out there. Like these guys are amazing anglers. And this is where social media could probably take to social media and really capitalize on it now that we have access to like satellite technology. I mean, we have cell phone companies now that are using Starlink satellites. You can get the Starlink Mini and it would literally, you know, Velcro onto the hood of your engine and you can broadcast live. And I think that's where we're going, where sponsorship can go. And maybe if that sponsorship money starts to trickle in and they can figure out that right formula, maybe that turns into a circuit that has more than 4 tournaments and a championship at the end of the day. Because the only way that you're going to play longer is if you have the sponsorship dollars to back that up. Because we as tournament anglers, we want a greater than 100% payout. Like we want that. Well, if you don't have sponsors who are willing to deep dive in because they don't see that return on investment into going beyond 4 regular season tournaments and a championship, and you know, a prepaid entry championship, if they can't see that ROI beyond that, you're never going to see it. So there are some guys that are you know, taking the bull by the horns, so to say, in the sense that they're playing around with this technology part and able to broadcast day 2, like on day 2 of the National Walleye Tour, you can broadcast the whole day you want. Well, to your point, Kurt, I don't want to sit down and watch one person fish all day long. But if there's 50 guys doing it, where I can bop in and I can watch Max Wilson for an hour, and I can watch Tom Wynn for an hour, and then I can watch Dewey for an hour, I'm going to do that. Why? Because you're going to see a ton of different styles of fishing. Well, those 3 are probably pretty similar, but you know what I mean? Like but you can jump over to a guy that's trolling crankbaits. You can go to a guy that's on a shallow rock pile, a guy that's on a weed bite, and see these different things. And that's going to draw viewership. Sponsors are going to notice that, and that's what they want to be involved with. And that, I think, is the next evolution in walleye fishing, tournament fishing, because the sponsors, if they see a value in that content and they can justify spending money on it, then they are willing to get their checkbooks out and sponsor the tournament series to be beyond what we consider that 4 regular season event plus a championship. I don't think it can expand beyond that.
So with what you're saying, you know, I brought this up. Like I watched some of Tom Wynn's live day 2 of the National Walleye Trail. And I was out to lunch with a couple of guys, and I said, "Have you watched Tom?" They go, "No, we didn't know he's doing it." One, because the National Walleye Trail wouldn't let you guys really do that except for day number 1. But he goes, "Have you ever watched Chris Zeldane's?" So I said, "No." So I went and watched Zeldane's live from Lake St. Clair. 1, he's got a Starlink on the boat, so he's got amazing reception.
You got to have one.
2, he's mic'd up the whole time. He's talking, even though he's the only guy in the boat. And his wife is back in the trailer running controls. So he's got his graph on one screen, kind of like we are tonight. He's got a GoPro mounted here that's pointing at this direction. He's got one here. Then he's wearing one on his chest, and she's watching along, running the controls. I'm guessing it's his wife because that's what she does in the trailer. Can't say that for sure, but there's somebody controlling that. So now Justin going out to do a job to fish the National Walleye Trail and compete. For you to put that camera in the back of your boat, great. But I love Tom Wynn, but I stared at the back of his head all day. He had another camera guy in the boat that was in front of the camera half the time. And it was like, and his co-anglers bouncing back and forth. And when he caught a fish, he'd come back and say, keeper, not keeper. But it takes more than that. You sat in the trailer during the Sharp Showdown because you were done early, and you got to watch what we're doing behind the scenes with stuff. And that's a full-time job.
Oh, yeah.
You're trying to have a conversation. Like you go to the Bassmasters, we've been to the Classic a couple times, and you watch them guys on stage, if it's Zona or Mercer, and they have one job, talking. There's another guy over to the side popping different pictures up. So
I mean, there's going to be a learning curve and there's going to be struggles behind it, but I know that there's guys putting effort into it and they will get it figured out.
Yeah,
they'll make a polished product, and then it's typical stuff like if somebody's on a heater with a jig and a crawler for the first couple seasons, there's one guy dominating it. Now everybody's doing it and they'll fall in line the same way. Yeah, and I think that's how. On the walleye side of things, the bass side kind of has that conquered, right? Like they have the infrastructure to do it. But on the walleye side, and I'll say this: during the Sharp Showdown, when Drew and I came in early on day 2 because we had our fish, and we got to sit down in studio and watch and talk to the anglers because you had cameras in the boat with them and chat. That for me was eye opening. It's like we need more of this, and that's going to catch on. But it's the infrastructure behind it because you need the National Walleye Tour then to step in, or you need the fishing crew to step in, or you need whatever the organization is to step in and have the infrastructure in place because it's good for the angler and their sponsors, but it's good for the tour itself. And there has to be that synergistic relationship between the two. And sometimes we butt heads too much because someone's not running the right boat or the right motors or the right graphs. And so there's too much animosity there for this to happen, and you need to get to the point where we're all in this together and we can all work together to make it bigger than what it is now, and we all benefit from that. And if we don't work together, then it's just going to go the way of the dinosaurs.
If we work,
it's going to get figured out.
If we work together, walleye becomes as big as bass.
Yeah, I think it has a lot of potential
because of they're fishing year round, right? I mean, they're fishing south, a little bit different deal there, but just walleye can be as big as bass.
I mean, you go back to this, Dinger, before you fish, and you probably follow along. PWT went to Bull Shores, Arkansas.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they had a Bull Shores, Arkansas stop. There's we have Texas walleye leagues. We have New Mexico walleye leagues. There's walleyes Nebraska. Everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah. I would love to see the National Walleye Tour or Masters Walleye Circuit spread their wings a little bit, but I get it. It's hard, right? You've got some guys like Dylan Nussbaum that can come from Pennsylvania, and you've got Will Cox come from Montana. But man, that traveling's a big thing. So I understand the upper Midwest, the Minnesota, Wisconsin, South Dakota, North Dakota thing. I get it.
And it's always easy, from my perspective, to say, "Oh man, I wish we did this or that." I'm not the one behind the scenes, dealing with the politics of have the host communities and everything that has to go in there. But I think that to go back to the social media thing and that live video feed of lots of different anglers where you can click in and out of different anglers to see what they're doing. I think that that's the new craze. Like I said, there are guys that are going to get figured out. I'm not going to be one of them because I can't, I couldn't get the camera hooked up and set up in the boat and expect anyone to watch, the camera pointed down in the water all day. But there are people that are going to come up with the formula. It's going to be easy to do. And that's going to grow our sport more than anything.
Yep.
But we need the tournament organization to help out and build that infrastructure, and it has to be a synergy. The synergy has to be there. It can't be you're not in the right boat, you're not with the right electronics, you're the right bait company. It can't be any of that. Just everybody has to work together.
Yeah, 100%.
I agree 100%. Yes. So, okay. It's like an hour and 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And I could probably go for another 35. You probably could.
Well, as I say, I could be here till tomorrow, but I got another Celsius I could drink, another.
I'll stop by the shop for one tomorrow. No, I think, honestly, I think this is a good place to stop for the simple fact that Mark Quartz is coming on next Wednesday night, and we are going to get in the weeds on this tournament.
Mark knows more about this than most anybody, so he'll be a great guy to get some questions ready for, and he has a lot of good answers.
That's why I just think this is a perfect place to stop.
Yeah.
It's been fantastic, dude. You have thrown some stuff at us that, frankly, are making. I mean, it's just made a ton of people react, and that's your job. So you done it well.
And I promise.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on.
I promise I will not give Chasen your address, but I will tell you check your vehicles for air tags. Because I
don't have an iPhone. I can't look for him.
I already know where he lives. You don't think I have?
Fine. Hey, I'll tell you what, Brian, you come on over. I'll take you for a jet boat ride, and then as soon as we get back to land, you'll be leaving.
Love it.
Oh, buddy.
All right, Digger.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Oh, yeah, man.